And then
Yeah, thank you.
I'll just make a quick intro. Maybe you can also introduce yourself. But yeah, thanks for joining us. So Nikhil Yadalas have been involved in and has been deeply invested and interested in the intersection of machine learning, life sciences research, and Web3. Nikhil's spent most of the past 10 years in the core of machine learning research and applications of ML, AI in computational biology, and also tech spanning in the areas of NLP, computer vision, speech processing, healthcare, and drug discovery. In the past, he was at the grad school at Carnegie Mellon University. He studied computer science at IIT Guwahati. Sorry if I mispronounced that. And he also worked in Microsoft AI&R department as a data and applied scientist. He built deep learning models that serve the entire Bing search traffic all over the world. So this is quite amazing. This is a really impressive background, Nikhil. And at some point, he was also building AI-based strategies for algorithmic high-frequency trading in the derivatives market across capital markets exchanges in India. So yeah, he has a really interesting background. And yeah, I don't know. I think I spoke a lot, but Nikhil, why don't you share with us what's your background?
Thanks a lot, Emilio, for that generous introduction and inviting me to this meeting. And thank you everyone for coming. So yeah, I am Nikhil. I am most interested in the intersection of computer science, AI, and life sciences. So today, I'm going to discuss a few things about what has AI and machine learning got to do with life sciences and what has happened so far. This is an area that I'm deeply passionate about and have spent the last 10 years in doing research in this area. And I would like for all of you to get a glimpse of what's happening in this field broadly and get an understanding of what our next steps could be, as humanity in developing some of the things in life sciences research. So I can go ahead, I guess. I'll start presenting. I'll share my screen. If any of you have any questions, feel free to ask me. And also I'll have a Q&A session towards the end of the presentation. So in case certain things need to be resolved, they may get resolved in the later slides as well. But feel free to question though. Is my screen visible?
Yes, it is now. Thanks, Nikhil.
Okay. Yeah, so all of you might have heard this phrase that, AI is the new electricity, it's the new oil, and whatnot. But the thing is, before we had electricity, we had several other amazing discoveries like agricultural revolution, the invent of computers, and then the cloud computing, and of course, electricity being one of them. Despite all these discoveries and inventions, even though they have changed a lot of things in our lives and they improved our lives significantly, however, one thing has always remained constant. That is, at least 70% of our lives are spent in illness, and especially the last 30 years are spent mostly in bed. And these 30 years are especially painful because you cannot do anything, you cannot do much, and you are always in requirement of support from others, and you would be spending all of your social security money on just making sure that you are alive. And this is not a acute pain of a day or two. It prolongs for 30 years until your death with no hope of recovering from it. This is something that has always been constant. This is fundamentally an issue of health. So how do we solve this health as an issue? And if AI is the new electricity, what has AI got to offer for us in terms of solving this new paradigm of AI for health? So if we look at broadly health, most of the common reasons for death in developed countries is heart attack and cancer. We are all possibly aware, and there have been significant efforts for the last 2 centuries in trying to combat these two diseases, especially heart attack and cancer. However, if you look at the scale of life expectancy, for example, let's take US. Until 1870, there was almost no growth in the lifespan or life expectancy. But around until 1870, around 1890, JAMA has begun running crowdsourced trials. So what this means is they try to study the corpus of research papers that have done specific peer-reviewed studies, and then the American Association of Medicine or the American Medical Association would prescribe specific drugs for specific conditions and so on. And what has happened because of that is we have seen a steep 4-year increase in life expectancy per decade until 1970 or so. But around 1960, there has been a change in lots of rules. Now, the government requires the pharma companies to conduct clinical trials. But all these safety requirements are supposed to improve health span, right? However, from 1970, there is a steep decrease in the increase in the life expectancy. So doing more and more clinical trials, more and more pharmaceutical companies have come into existence. Everybody is doing more research. And despite all this, life expectancy growth has been decreasing. One of the reasons for this is each of these trials requires a very stringent exclusion criterion. What I mean by that is whenever a drug's made for cancer or heart attack, whenever they do a clinical trial, not everybody can be part of the clinical trial. Only a few set of healthy people or a few set of people with that specific disease can be part of the trial because they need to establish the causation. Due to such very strong, stringent exclusion criterion, we do not know the impact of any of these drugs with any associations other than the disease. For example, let's take COVID drug. A lot of us might have taken the COVID vaccine. We know that the vaccination trials were done, but the clinical trials are done on healthier people only. However, the vaccines were taken not just by healthy, but also some of the people who are immunocompromised, pregnant women, breastfeeding women, and we don't know the impact of this drug on all these things, and nobody has done clinical trials on them. But the crazy thing is, this is not just about the COVID vaccine. Almost all the drugs are done like this. All the clinical trials are done like this. As we progress, people are living longer. Despite the growth being slower, people still are living longer. But because of that, people get newer diseases. So we need an increase in the number of new treatments and new drugs approved for us to solve these diseases. However, if you look at the graph of the number of new treatments that are approved across the decades, there has been a steep decrease. There is a big decrease around this point, which is 1962, which is same as this, where the government has, before 1962, if a drug is safe, then a doctor can associate your disease to the drug and they can prescribe it to you. But after this, you need very stringent clinical trials specifically established only for that specific disease. And even if there is a general knowledge that a drug can be helpful for other diseases, you still cannot use it and the doctor cannot prescribe it. And there are so many other issues going on, because of which we have not been able to develop drugs and treatments despite all these technological advancements. This is a graph of cost to develop a new drug. This graph is adjusted to inflation. If you look at the cost of your computer or smartphone or the cost of air travel, everything decreases as we progress towards better and better technology. But the cost of developing a single drug has been exponentially increasing. This is not even a linear increase, which is very saddening. This is exact opposite of progress. So how do we target these diseases? How do we develop drugs uh, in an optimized manner so that the cost at least stays flat or decreases? So one of the ways we could tackle and optimize this problem is to tackle the fundamental source of issues. If you have to create drugs for every disease separately, like heart attack, cancer, and each of the cancers has a separate drug, that's one way to go about it, which the world is already working on. But the other efficient way to target these diseases to decrease the cost of developing new drugs is to tackle the fundamental cause of all these diseases, which is aging. So as you age, if you see this graph, the probability or the risk of diseases increases exponentially for a lot of diseases. And you may say that this is called, this is just a natural process. I mean, it could be natural. That's not a matter of discussion here. There is an underlying biological cause for all these diseases, and we should start targeting those underlying pathways. And that underlying process biologically is called aging. So how can you increase your lifespan and stay healthier? A lot of people try to do blood tests, and all these blood tests measure several markers like triglycerides, LDL, WBC count, creatinine phosphokinase. Whenever you go to a doctor prescribes you so many tests, and now there are more doctors than ever. There are more hospitals, there are more providers than ever, and more tests being prescribed. And if we keep taking all these tests regularly, there is a chance that some of the anomalies are discovered early in life. But people still are suffering. So what is the reason? If people are still taking the tests, and if doctors are looking at all these tests, why do we still get sick? Why do we still fall ill? That's because these tests only talk about one side of the story. For example, in this scenario, this person has only 5% blood glucose levels, and this person who is athletic has a 5.5% blood glucose levels. If you just look at only the test, you may wrongly conclude that this person with a higher number of blood glucose is at a risk of diabetes. But it is important for us to consider not just the blood markers, but also the lifestyle factors of what do you do from the time you wake up to the time you sleep. And we also need to understand what do you eat and how each of these substances that you eat and the people you associate with and the mental energy is spent, how each of them associates with these other markers. Unless you have such a holistic view of any specific person, you would not be able to accurately predict the onset of diseases. So despite all the increase in the testing that collects all these markers, since we do not collect any of this lifestyle information and the doctors do not process this automatically, we still cannot predict any of these things properly. And to make things work, research on all these things is extremely limited. We have no clue on what is happening about what is the impact of the thousands of chemicals in our diet. And if you look at the chemical space, there are a total of 166 billion potentially stable medical molecules possible. And out of all this, we have only studied the impacts of 21,000 drugs. And even these 21,000 drugs are studied via the clinical trials with all the restrictions that we just discussed about. So there are so many problems. We have so many chemicals in the food. We have so many drugs. We have so many people trying out various foods and various drugs and medicines with various kinds of issues. And we have very less people doing the research. So this is precisely where AI can help solving the problem. It takes thousands and thousands of researchers to study a few pathways. in collaboration. But AI, on the other hand, can help us study all these impacts much faster, but it's not straightforward. If it was straightforward, we would already have AI doing all these things. But we have so many issues down the line. So I'll get to each one of them and where our current stance is in terms of each one of them. So if we look at aging, we already have a pretty good understanding of what causes aging. There are several hallmarks of aging, like instability in the genome and the telomeres decreasing, and certain changes in the epigenome, which is epigenome is basically everything other than the DNA that regulates how the core DNA has to function, and also loss of proteostasis, which is as you age, some of the proteins do not fold properly and they get accumulated or deaccumulated in various tissues, and so on. We can keep going deeper into the biology of each of these pathways, but biologists and the researchers have done a great job in identifying them. But now it's our job to figure out how to target all these pathways to discover the drugs using AI. So one of the solutions to doing this is using an aging clock. If you have so many things, for example, here you see 7 or 8 hallmarks of aging. How do you make sure that you are definitely aging slow? For example, if I come up with a drug that targets genomic instability, let us say this particular thing is taken care of, but it may have a side impact of worsening dysregulated nucleus nutrient sensing. Let's say I come up with another drug to treat this, then again, this gets messed up. Then I come up with another drug, then again, it gets messed up. This is something similar to what's happening today with all the diseases. You take drug A, it has a side effect, it gives you disease B. You take this, and then you take another drug for the disease B, it gives you another side effect, and it gives you disease C. And you keep taking drugs forever and keep going in cycles. And the same thing would again happen if you try to target each one of them individually without having a sense of what's happening at a broad level. So for us to understand what's happening at a very broad level, we need some metric that can measure how good are we doing. If I take a drug that targets this specific thing, not only should I know if this specific thing has improved, but I should also know, am I getting any side effects? Is the side effect being more than the actual impact? Overall, am I getting healthier, or overall, am I getting worse? So how do you measure all these things? These things can be measured using AI-based aging clocks. There is no such thing as biologically aging clock. If you were to see cancer, you would see cancer cells in the body. If you were to see a heart issue, you would see some dysregulated blood pumping in the heart. If you were to see aging in the body, there is no one single thing that you can see in the body and say that this person has aged. So aging is a bit more abstract thing. Despite being a real process in the body, it's still abstract. You cannot easily see it and pinpoint and say this particular location is the reason for aging, which is why we need to come up with abstract numbers using mathematics and AI modeling that measures the pace at which one is internally aging. And these kind of models are called aging clocks. Aging clocks measure the accurate representation of how healthy you are internally. It measures something called biological age. Biological age is a proxy of your actual health status. Based on your birthday, you could be 80 years old, but internally, if you are healthy, your biological age could be just 20 or 30, and it could be reverse as well. You could be heavily smoking for decades, heavily drinking for decades, and your biological age accelerates. So if you look at some of the research that has already been done on how biological age as a number represents various health conditions, for example, people with heavy alcohol consumption have 2.5 years increase in the biological age per year. This is just for 1 year. So This is something like, taking a loan. If you take a loan and if you have 2.5 interest for the loan keeps accumulating every year. So if you are consuming alcohol heavily every year, and it keeps accumulating every year with a 2.5% interest, it is something like that. So aging clock overall correlates well with several of these conditions that today we have issue with. Um, Interestingly, depression and anxiety have as much an impact as smoking on an average. Uh, One of the things interesting here is if people who are diabetic and they are on a treatment, they actually age slower on an average. It need not be true for a specific given individual, but overall broadly they age slower. This is because one of the widely prescribed treatments for diabetes is metformin, and metformin also happens to be targeting the pathways of aging. So it's also considered as aging drug in some of the scientific communities for aging. So if you do take metformin and if a doctor prescribes it, then you may see certain benefit. But still, we do not have very solid research to back this claim of it. And also, if your biological age, let's say, decreases by 1 year, there is a significant decrease in your risk of diseases, and eventually you would also save up with a lot of money by just decreasing your biological age. So how do you calculate this biological age number? I assume all of you are interested in AI and machine learning, but this is a problem of health. There are so many diseases, so many health conditions. How do you translate this problem of healthcare into the problem of machine learning and AI, so that each one of us can actually contribute our expertise? So the way to go about it is, there are a lot of data sets of all the tests that people take. For example, this is one such test for the TSH levels, which is also called thyroid stimulating hormone. And people take a lot of tests like the blood glucose test or the lipid tests and so on. No matter what is the marker that you are measuring, there are several machine learning problems over here. For example, the first machine learning problem is to identify an abnormal progression. This is a time series problem. If I take a test 5 times in 5 years, has the progression of my marker been normal? First of all, what is the normal progression of a given marker has to be established statistically from the data. And secondly, we need to understand what is called an abnormal progression. And third, it is good if we can assess the future value from the trend, so that we don't really have to wait until the marker becomes extremely bad, so that we can screen for a potential future risk. We do all these kinds of things. For example, we do stock market analysis, where we try to establish if the price of a given stock goes up or down. This is basically the same problem. Once you understand if the market has to be up or down, then we are trying to understand if this is going in the correct direction. And secondly, we should be able to understand the not just whether the market is going up or down, but also the pace or the acceleration at which it goes up or down. And it depends a lot on the pre-existing conditions. So for example, let's again go back to the example of the stock market analysis. If you have a portfolio, if a specific stock price is going up or down, that doesn't independently say your portfolio value. It also depends on all other previous profits and margins that you have made. So you need to be able to understand the risk that is associated because of the pre-existing conditions. And eventually, to make an aging clock, you do all of this analysis and you finally come up with numbers that understand the increased risk of death and the increased risk of age-specific diseases. And also take into consideration the fitness scores, like how much energy do you have in a day, how much how much endurance do you have, how much can you walk, are you able to sleep well, are you able to control your stress levels. So all these things also get added, and then you create an ensemble of all these scores, which is a number that represents how fast or slow you are aging in your body. This is this is broadly how you can convert a problem in the space of health into sub-problems in machine learning. And using the numbers that come as output of each of these models, you would be able to come up with biological age as a number. And now we can use this biological age as a number to do clinical trials. So if I come up with a drug, then if I have to say that this specific drug impacts aging, then I need to show that this number decreases over time. So if you take a drug for 2 years, this 0.8 should become at least less than 0.8. Otherwise, the drug is not working. So now we have been able to measure aging. So far, we haven't measured it. And AI, for the first time, has helped us measure aging. So it's good, right? Now we are able to measure aging. So why don't we do the clinical trials? Where are the clinical trials for aging? We do not yet clearly know which drugs solve aging, because had we known, all of us would be taking them right now. That's because FDA doesn't still consider aging as a disease. Not only FDA, every country has a parallel for FDA, and no country in the world considers aging as a disease. And specifically, one of the issues is aging clock is still an abstract number. As we just discussed, cancer is something visible. You can see a cancerous growth or cancer cell, but aging is measured by an aging clock, and aging clock is a number that was just spit out from a few machine learning models. So how do you convince doctors and the policymakers and decision makers to start using this clock as a metric to do the clinical trial? The only way you could do this is by making the AI models more explainable. As long as these models look like black box models, nobody can trust the output of these models, despite all the correlations. So we need some explainable AI. So how do we do that? So for the first time ever, we have got the capacity to create explainable LLMs for longevity. So I'll describe about this in a bit. So if you go to ChatGPT, and if you ask any specific question related to biology or health or aging, for example, this is a question, these genes, can you explain the connections of these things with this, with aging and longevity? This is a standard format for every health question in ChatGPT. I'm sure all of you might have asked a lot of questions. It first gives you some useless information, and then it gives you very generic information that you can also see in Wikipedia. And then sometimes it tells you some stuff, but you do not know the authenticity of it. It just mentioned that there are some specific polymorphisms and they may have associations. But how do you trust this? For example, if I have ChatGPT in my phone, and let us say I claim that I am a doctor, and then I tell you some specific suggestions, and if I tell you my degrees from ChatGPT, you would not want to listen to me, right? So we cannot trust these models to come up with any good information or any specific drugs. But the good thing is we have LLMs which are open source, and we can fine tune them. We can pre-train them to actually make it useful. And also GPT itself has APIs, so we can build certain extra layers around it to make all of this useful and explainable. So summarizing the issues with ChatGPT, they don't know longevity related data sets. So, and on top of that, it hallucinates. Even if you ask GPT to give you specific sources, it gives you random papers that never existed. Because for GPT, all of this is just text. There is no logic here. They are very bad at understanding logic and math. So it doesn't understand the concept of causation, that if you drink this, then specific gene gets affected, and specific pathway gets affected, and it gives you a specific disease. There is no such logical understanding that GPT has, and we need to explicitly induce it through inductive bias. And they definitely cannot come up with any logical protocols or hypothesis for the aging research, because it can only talk about what has already been discussed in the training data set. It cannot come up with a new thing at all. So to tackle all these issues with ChatGPT and Llama, we have built the ecosystem for the longevity LLM. So the longevity LLM uses longevity GPT. It not only answers the question, and for every line in the answer, it backs up with a source. So for each line, it said about the effect FOXO3A gene and its polymorphisms, you know the exact, this is a citation, and you could go here, you could see who are the authors, and you could think for yourself if you should trust it or not. Because each of these papers are peer reviewed, now we have more data, and you know if you should believe it or not. So how do we do it? Once you have a prompt and a query, we have a database of longevity, aging, and health papers that are continuously getting indexed. And then the model does a search on these papers to understand if this specific topic has been discussed in any of the research papers. And all of this context gets added, and there are multiple calls that goes to the LLM to create a logical pipeline out of this. And eventually we get a response. So this way, the call doesn't directly go to the longevity. The call doesn't go to ChatGPT. It goes to the research papers, it does a search, it finds the answer, and then uses the large language model to consolidate the answer. This is how we can 100% make sure that the solution is relevant and it is cited with the relevant source. But still, this is still restricted to only research papers. It can still only talk about what has been discussed in the research papers. So now we also have agents. Agents not only talk about research papers, but also go on the internet and try to fetch relevant information that could be useful. So these agents actually help us do much more tougher things that can be explained. For example, if you need one of the agents for personalized longevity is if you have a question on how good is a keto diet or what is a healthy keto plan, you get an answer, but everybody gives you a different answer. You know, your cousin tells you a different answer, doctor one tells a different answer, and this is another doctor who told one of the answers. So you see, there is an answer and there is a source for that specific answer. So you can choose who do you want to follow on the internet, and you can call that specific agent to index all the stuff that this person has spoken about publicly, and you will be able to get all the outputs from that specific person. And similarly, if you have any health history or a health question, you could still ask a question, and ChatGPT would just say that you know, you have it would either say you to consult a doctor, or it gives you some suggestions that cannot be backed up, so you don't know if you should trust it. But here each agent is linked with a specific personality on the internet. So whenever it says you something, not only does it explicitly give away on whose recommendations is it giving you this answer, but also where have they discussed it and what are the papers that back it up, so you can 100% trust. Now, this is how we try to make LLMs explainable. Once we make LLMs explainable that also try to solve the other problems, then we can bring FDA and the other government institutes to start using aging clocks as endpoints for the clinical trials, because whatever we claim is being explained automatically by all these papers. Now, what's next in all of this? We need to make agents for drug discovery and biomarker discovery. All of this is still only for research, right? We are just trying to ask questions and it's giving answers. So it's just a question and answer pipeline. But we just discussed at the beginning that there are 166 billion drug compounds, and we only studied 24,000 of them. So how do you give the ability for AI to study the efficacies and the impact of all these billions of molecules and all the trillions of the associations of these drugs with food habits and health habits? For example, if you drink alcohol, should you still take drug A for the disease A? No one knows. For every drug, no one has clue as to what is the side effect of the drug in presence of too much alcohol or too less alcohol, or in presence of whiskey. No one has any clue of that. So we need to understand all these impacts. So how do we do it? We do it by building agents. So we do not yet have these agents, but we can have it. We will probably have it in a year or two. And a lot of people are building this. You can also come and contribute over here. So what do these agents do? So we need an army of agents that in a way do research, like how labs and a multiple group of PhD people do. For example, one of the agents would identify the targets in the body, and it will identify by looking at the research papers. And you would have another agent that will hypothesize the list of the molecules called biomarkers. A biomarker is a signal in the body that is indicative of a disease or a specific target pathway. So it comes up with the list of hormones or enzymes or proteins that need to be targeted. And then you have another agent that will screen for potential chemical molecules that have already passed safety tests in the FDA. So you can be sure that you won't get, like, you can be sure that you won't die of the drug. So another agent would find such potential candidates. And then you may have another agent which will take decentralized and open source health apps to perform clinical trials. In order to do a clinical trial for a drug that's already being used by people, you do not necessarily need FDA. Since people are already using it and a lot of people track them using some open source apps, you can establish the efficacy of a specific protocol or a specific drug on this specific outcome called the biomarker, and eventually see if it impacts the target pathway or not. And all of this can be done automatically by this army of agents. You do not even need human intervention. And at each step of this is AI-enabled solutions that keep looking for the right thing to do. And eventually, we'll have other agents which will measure the improvements on the organ-specific clocks and see if any of this protocol has helped in slowing down aging. If not, the search keeps going on. We have near to infinite compute right now, and a lot of GPUs just sit idle in a lot of companies. So if you have these agents built and each of these agents doing some drug discovery research, at least one compound every day, doing trials automatically on the apps, think about how much data would LLMs itself generate in a year. In a year, the amount of data it would generate would be way higher than the amount of data that we have so far with centuries of research. This is where we can go with the existing agent networks and LLMs. So to summarize everything, there are a few things where AI can help. So the first thing is AI can enable the trials for personalized medicine. So whenever a clinical trial is done, rather than just saying that this drug is good or this vaccine is good, we can do a deeper machine learning analysis to understand how the risk changes across the groups. For example, pregnant women, non-pregnant women, and how the safety considerations have to be established among people with various health conditions. For example, if I have cancer, maybe I should not take the drug. And if I have Alzheimer's, maybe it's okay to take the drug. So we need to go deeper and do a deeper analysis in these trials. And all of this is enabled, of course, by machine learning. And second, we should start using AI-based aging clocks as the clinical trial endpoints, so that not only are you targeting each disease specifically separately, but we target the fundamental cause of all these diseases, which is aging. And this is the most optimized thing to do. If you know for sure that you can already do this in an optimized manner, and if you still do not do it, then all of us suffer by not doing it, because all of us actually feel pain and go to ICU and eventually die in a painful state. So this is one of the good tools we have, AI, to actually do it. And the last step is using the agents and LLMs for hypothesis generation towards drug discovery and biomarker discovery, which is essentially, this. Not only do these LLMs just talk about what has already been done or just measure aging, but they should also come up with new ways of doing things. And also agents keep validating whether a specific thing is safe or not. This is broadly what I wanted to discuss, where AI intersects with health and longevity for trials, measuring, and hypothesis generation and validation. If you would like to contribute to any of these efforts, these are some of the organizations that you could join and start contributing. Yeah, if you have any questions or if you would like to ask me anything else, please let me know. This is it. Thank you.
Amazing, Nikhil. It's yeah. I can tell you know a lot, and you've been doing a lot of research, and thank you for actually synthesizing this topic that quite a bit could well, it is a little bit difficult, not gonna lie. So yeah. Guys, so if everyone wants to make any question, just feel free to raise your hands, and then we'll go by one, or just type it into the chat and then I'll read it for you. We're gonna look at that, my friend Ricardo from Ecuador joining. Great. Go ahead, Ricardo.
Hi, Nikhil. So glad to meet you. I'm actually doing consulting for hospitals here in Ecuador as my graduation project. And one of the main issues is how they the doctors or public hospitals can or could adopt technology or AI-based tools. Do you have any insights on how to approach it or something?
Yeah, so doctors, in my experience, doctors generally have a lot going on, like their entire time is already filled up with all the patients that they need to look at, also booked in for the next few months. So they are very reluctant to try out new things because they don't really have the time to do it. So I think the best approach would be to deal directly with the insurances or the provider office and have them understand the explainability of all these models. Then they will evaluate if that is good for their clinic, and then the doctor may start using it. But the most important thing is explainability. If we cannot explain why a specific decision has been taken, the doctors would be extremely hesitant to use that solution.
Thank you, Nikhil. I think I have a follow-up question.
Go ahead.
Is there any sorry, how do you think it's easier to manage data on patients, or is it difficult, or what's a great approach to manage the hospital's data?
For the hospital, there there are actually so many apps right now that any hospital can use to manage the data. I think there is not any difficulty from the technology side because we have hundreds of such softwares and apps. But the difficulty is in convincing the hospital management to actually store the data so that in the future their patients can get a better care. Yes, I think it's a problem of how do you convince people to go in a specific direction to use the technology, but not a problem of not a problem of lack of technology. For example, QDAO and Healome already have the apps that can do this. And there are decentralized apps as well, where the data is not even stored on a centralized server, and there is a full and you can authenticate through zero knowledge proof. So even the so it's completely anonymous, but very few hospitals actually use it. So we all need to try to convince the hospitals and the government regulators.
Thank you, Nikhil. Awesome.
Great. So, Sebastian.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, perfectly.
Well, at first, that's all. I love the product, but I will be honest as possible. How do you see it on the commercial side? Because almost here in Latin America, the clinics or the hospitals are so close with that solutions. It seems like bureaucratic, and well, we don't have almost on private hospitals, they don't have enough data to manage all the symptoms and all the stuff. I see like you sell this product to B2C and B2B. How was going on that side?
Yeah. So all of the things that I actually described are currently open source and decentralized. So we are not making any money out of this. So it's for anybody to come and contribute. And also, since the code is open sourced, you can verify what is exactly happening or contribute changes if there is something wrongly happening. So the reason one of the reasons it's open source is to enable these hospitals to trust the solution and easily get onboarded. There are a lot of closed source solutions too, but those closed source solutions deal with only specific hospitals in specific countries. So that is going to be an issue.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I told that because I saw as startup health tech seems like that on Argentina, but the founder have to talk with each one hospital, and
Yeah,
maybe in the Latin America culture is so bureaucratic and they are so close to new things.
yeah, I would actually say that that's the same in other Asian countries and the American countries as well.
Cool. So, well, nothing, and I love the product. I see the trial on the app, and I love. So good luck.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think all of us, what we have to do is we all come from the AI and the technology side, and we have been building a lot of solutions for healthcare. We have to show, we have to solve these problems and convince the government. Each one of us should take the responsibility to convince each one of these government institutes and hospitals. Only then will there be a huge progress possible. We cannot work without them, and they need to work with us for doing it at a much accelerated pace, which is very essential. It's a tough
Cool.
problem, but we need to solve it.
Yeah, cool.
Amazing. I think Gabriel raised a hand. I don't know if he's with us anymore. I mean, I think he left the meeting. That sounded a little
Sorry.
bit dramatic. Yeah,
Oh,
go
he's
ahead.
here.
Yeah, we
Okay.
can.
Hello. I'm actually kind of an aging person, and I've also built some aging clocks using deep learning. So I know a bit about the aging clock part, and I wanted to ask you some things. Most of the most like famous clocks out there, like let's say GrimAge and PhenoAge and all of them, they're basically just built like over a lasso regression, or you basically have elastic net and a lasso regression, and that is, well, from the perspective of AI, that's basically just a toy. So the weird thing with those is that they actually work well. Especially if you train them over epigenetics, they work really well. So my key concern in the aging clock field is the problem difficult enough to like justify the use of AI? So I wanted to know like your thoughts on that. Yeah,
definitely. No, like you're so right in that those logistic regression and elastic net have been actually doing very good job. But I was curious to use the same data sets of PhenoAge and GrimAge and have neural networks and autoencoders to see if they can improve the performance, but they did not improve. But my conclusion, like it's my personal conclusion, was that for this specific kind of data, where you're looking at the biochemistry markers and panels, it's a very low density, it's a very low dimensional data in the sense like 30 to 40 markers. And all of these data sets are dealing with at max 40 to 50K data points. So, so either the data set is still small, or the data set is good enough, but the dimensionality is so low that you don't need advanced models. However, if you look at the clocks that are based on, let us say, single cell RNA sequencing, that try to understand the organ-specific aging. So here, each of the data points has around the 30 to 40K dimensions of the RNA sequence.
Super high dimension.
Yeah. So there you have to inevitably use these autoencoders and very good machine learning models to condense the data. And if you just use linear regression there, we have already seen that the results are not that great. And there are also some models in between, right? So all of this GrimAge and PhenoAge, you can immediately improve the accuracies by going a bit above the linear regression, by going to the trees, etc.
Yeah,
so,
tree-based model. Okay.
Yeah. So the answer is that there are some data sets of single cell sequencing where we definitely have to use higher advanced models. But the second interesting thing is we have not yet reached saturation in terms of accuracy of these aging clocks, right? There is still so much scope to improve. So how do you improve it? It's not like GPT-4 where nobody can build any more better foundational model. It's in a much elementary state. So there is still a lot of innovation that needs to be done in terms of AI. Just that innovation has to happen in a different direction than what has already happened.
Okay. Yeah. It's well, just a quick comment there. I've been talking with the startup guys that make these companies based on aging clocks, and they actually don't want clocks with zero error, because like the key point of the clock is to obtain a delta with your chronological age, and then say something like, hey, you're aging faster, or hey, you're aging slower. And and that kind of stuff. And maybe a last
Yeah.
question.
Sorry, just for that,
Yep.
right? You rather than just saying how fast or slow you are aging, there are much more better metrics like hazard ratios that can be improved, which basically tell you the increased risk of diseases or death in
the
response to
prediction
1
of
year increase in
outcomes.
the age. Yeah. So I think
Right.
that would be a much better metric. If somebody claims they have a very good aging clock, I would want to ask them what are their hazard ratios rather than their delta with the chronological age. Because if your data set has massively unhealthy people, then you will have high delta. If all your people are healthy, you will have low delta.
Yeah, there's a recent paper called, it's from the Gladishep lab. It's called causal aging or something like that. They did something quite similar to that. But okay, my last question was, it feels like for the aging field, what you can do with AI is kind of the same of what you can do for any computational biology like approach. So let's say drug discovery, and yeah, sure, we can do drug discovery like for aging. However, kind of the drug discovery pipeline is a kind of general, and then you just need to find the specific targets. So you have that, and also with explainability, it's kind of the same. You would want something like a medical GPT, and you want it to be explainable. So apart from the clocks that I think it's like a specific thing about aging, what do you see different in AI for aging specifically, like differentiating it from other parts of computational biology?
Yeah. Yeah, basically, majorly two things. So one of them is, again, sort of like tying back to the clock in the sense that we are not looking at anything physical here. We are looking at abstract number, which is a very common thing for machine learning researchers to look at and computer science people to look at. But for drug discovery people, it's a very abnormal thing to look at an abstract number and say things are improving or not. That's fundamentally because of that. I think the major difference is in all the causal reasoning models, right? All the causal reasoning models in general computational biology, towards the end, at some downstream point, you have specific gene or a protein synthesized. But here, if you were to establish the causation of let's say fasting, you are not. The causal models are structured in such a way that some aging clock changes, which is an abstract number. So the way you build these causal reasoning models itself is very different. I think apart from that, I'm not sure what else is different. I think they're all very similar.
Man, it's because there is a company, maybe you know it, in Silico, from Alexander Shabrankov, and they are like, yeah, we're doing so much aging and all that stuff, but they are a drug discovery company, like AI first drug discovery, and they just like trying to get a lucky spot when one of the drugs they find is going to be like related to aging, but it's not happening.
Yeah, I think at that scale, everything is similar. I think at a much lower questions like how much water should I drink to control my aging?
Like lifestyle.
So, So building causal models for such things. How many times should I blink my eye? I mean, it's a very random question, but can you come up with an answer, or at least the proof that there is no answer?
Okay. Thank you.
Amazing. So I think we have probably just space for one more question. If someone wants to raise their hand, please go ahead. And if not, I have a question for you, Nikhil. And I'm gonna apologize beforehand because I'm not sure if you're really familiar with this, but I'm just gonna shoot you, okay? So today, this just happened today, AlphaFold, which is from Google, right, from DeepMind, won an award, which is called the Lasker Awards. Are you familiar with the AlphaFold and what they're doing? By any chance, do you think you can explain to us what are they trying to build and why it is important?
Yeah, I don't know about that award. But AlphaFold basically tries to I think at least the initial versions, I don't know what is happening with the latest versions, tries to understand the protein structure.
Yeah.
Like every protein is a sequence of 22 essential, it's just a sequence of amino acids. And this sequence determines how it folds in three-dimensional structure inside a cell. And if you look at, for example, towards the beginning, we had one of the hallmarks of aging. One of them is loss of proteostasis. So some of the proteins over time do not fold properly in the cells. And if the structure of a specific protein is not like how it is supposed to be, then it doesn't interact with other proteins. So this is a very important problem to identify and predict what exactly is going to be the structure of a protein given the amino acid sequence. There are a lot of chemistry-based and energy-based models, but AlphaFold is an AI-based model that tries to predict and identify all the structure-related stuff. Yeah, that was a few years back. Now I think they might have added a few more heads to it, and it might be doing much more than that.
Yeah, probably. And also, again, I don't know if you're really familiar with that, but so it was on that making headlines, right? That Sam Altman invested like 180 million in this biotech company that's called Retro Biosciences.
Yeah.
So do you think that's shedding some light into where are we going? How far are we? Do you think that's proof of that, or we're still a long way?
No, it is a proof of that, and I think again I'm not very sure. I think Retro Biosciences works on some T-cell cellular regeneration therapy, so it tries to target some of these aging pathways biologically and try to improve those cells. I'm not very sure apart from that. But again, there is this concept called longevity escape velocity, where you don't really have to all of a sudden solve aging. Let us say if you solve aging enough to give 30 extra healthy years to people, in the extra 30 years, you will still keep doing more research and come up with another extra 30 years, and it keeps going on like that for indefinitely. So that's so if you just reach that, that is a sufficient enough thing.
Amazing. So do you think that's actually kind of some progress towards the goal of actually, because that's another thing that I actually want to clarify, right? So it's not that we want to live forever, but actually want to have a better life in terms of not battling diseases the last years of our life, right? Am I correct?
So it is definitely, that is so right. So it is definitely a positive it's definitely in the right direction, but how far we are away from that to it is something that I don't know. I don't know much about this to answer that question.
Sure. Don't worry. And my last question, I'm gonna leave it to Gabriel. Is so I was listening actually to I think it was a professor from genetics in Harvard. I think his name is George or something like that, and he was saying that one of the challenges he's facing is specifically that the companies or the labs that are building tech for anti-aging are believed to be something that just the Silicon Valley people is trying to get because of the spite of it, right? Just kind of like they want to live forever. It's kind of an eccentric thing, but right now we're discussing that it's more about living a healthier and richer life, right? So how would you explain what really is longevity and why is it important in the sense of this is not about living forever, but actually we're trying to make a better lives? Like, how can you actually explain that to someone that doesn't understand that concept behind?
I
know it's complicated.
I would go about it like this, right? If you have an option to delay the onset of, let's say, cancer or Alzheimer's or Parkinson's of your loved ones, you would want to delay it by as much time as possible. And what happens as a secondary impact of that is you also live longer, which is why our life expectancies increase as we try to solve diseases, as we have more vaccines for some fundamental diseases. As a side effect of it, you also start to live longer. But But everybody who gets heart attack goes to hospital. Everyone who has cancer, most of them actually get anti-cancer treatment. So people are eventually, no matter what they want to say, are interested in getting the treatments. So they could actually save money on the treatments and also pain going through the treatments. And secondly, even if we did hypothetically solve aging, it it won't just happen where you are just sitting in a room and you become immortal. You have to do work. It's like
Mhm.
it's like going to gym and exercising. You still have to put in a lot of work, and you can decide if you would like to do that or not. We know that exercise is good, but not everybody does it because it's their decision and in their optimization process, it's not at a higher preference. So you may decide what you want to do eventually. It's about giving choice to the people. Right now, there is no choice to the people. All of us
Yeah.
just die a very bad death. We don't have choice.
Yeah, absolutely amazing. Thank you, Nikhil. Gabriel, yeah, go ahead, and I think we're gonna wrap it up there.
Yeah, sure. It's just one quick comment.
Don't worry.
Some time ago, I got in a chat with the CEO of Retro. This is the company that you're talking about,
Oh,
and
amazing.
I actually have a bit of insights on what they are doing with deep learning. So they are something really similar to what you said, Nikhil. They are making single cell transcriptomic aging clocks. I don't know if it's epigenetics, but I think it's transcriptomic aging clocks, and they are trying to do like a series of perturbations to the cells, and they're trying to screen. But they're using the aging clocks as a screening platform for treatments. So let's say they put 1,000 compounds in the cells, and then they use the aging clocks to like see what's like working there. And they are doing that with partial reprogramming and heterochronic parabiosis, which is the other thing. But I think that's it. That's the thing they're doing. Yeah. That was
That is
the
awesome.
comment.
I didn't know that they were doing large scale in vitro studies, but that's interesting.
Yeah. And there is another company that's called Shift Biosciences. Shift Biosciences is the head of ML of that company is the guy. It's the guy that has like the only deep learning based epigenetics aging clock, and they are also doing something like that. They have a clock, then they overexpress some genes, and then they use the clock to see which like upregulated genes affect the aging of the cell. But that's a like huge super high throughput like experimentation, and it's really cool.
Yeah, it's really cool.
That's amazing, Gabriel. Can I ask you something? Do you think you could explain to us that in the simplest terms of all, like about retro bioscience again? Like, how could you simplify what they're trying to achieve? Like, if we were completely stupid.
And yeah, well, the CEO, he's called Joe Betts. He basically made like a bunch of startups previously, and then he was like, well, what do I want to do with my life? So he was like, yeah, I would like to try to do the aging problem. And then what they are trying to do is to take like most of the already known things that work for aging. So that's partial reprogramming, that's heterochronic parabiosis, and like other like proven approaches. And they are basically just trying very hard to get them approved. They say that their goal is to add something like 10 years of human health span. And well, if you don't understand something like, let's say, partial reprogramming is a kind of like genetic therapy where you take a cell and you overexpress some genes in that cell, and that cell basically comes to an earlier stage. So that cell is kind of rejuvenated. So what people are trying to do is to like do that kind of genetic therapy all around the body, and seeing if that has like an effect on the like the main phenotype of aging. So that's they are basically taking all the proven approaches and working really hard to get them into a clinical trial FDA approval. That's their, yeah, but they are mainly a biological company, so they are mainly wet lab. They are not, well, they are doing machine learning and deep learning, but it's not their focus.
Amazing. Thanks for the clarification and explanation. Actually, it's great. Looking forward to meet you as well, Gabriel. You've shared a lot of insights which are really valuable for all of us. So yeah, thanks everyone for coming. I think that's about it, unless anyone has any question. I think we're good. Nikhil, thank you so much for coming, and thank you for everyone who actually stayed with us until this time. Looking forward to see you soon in the next talk. And yeah, if you have people that you want to share this chat with, I can share some links. And yeah, please feel free to invite more people to the community so we can expand and share this amazing knowledge for free across all the region. So yeah, thanks everyone.
Thank you, everyone.